You're listening to the Wordslinger Podcast, episode 19. Kobolds ate my interview with John Kovalic.
This episode of the Wordslinger Podcast is brought to you by Happy Pants Books. Are you a coach, consultant, or keynote speaker who needs to publish or perish? Get your ideas out of your head and onto the page. Visit happypantsbooks.com.
It's the Wordslinger Podcast, where story matters. Build your brand, write your book, redefine who you are. It's all about the story here. What's yours? Now, here's the guy who invented Pants Optional, Kevin Tomlinson, the Wordslinger.
Wordslinger.
Hey, everybody. How's everybody doing today? I am, I want to confess something to you because this is you get a little behind the scenes look at the show, but I listen to that intro every single time that I do my intro for the show, because I don't know, it kind of gets me into the Wordslinger headspace. So just like you, I hear the theme song, and I also hear the announcer. And I'm working on a few things to kind of spice things up and change things around. So look for that here in 2015 at some point, I'm sure. Always refining, always iterating, always improving. So at any rate, at the head of the show, you heard a new ad. How'd you like that? That is interesting. And if you are interested in becoming an author, especially if you are in the business world, if you're a consultant or a coach or a keynote speaker and you're interested in, getting a book, and maybe you need someone to ghostwrite it, or maybe you need someone to just sort of guide you and help you through that process, go check out happypantsbooks.com, where you're going to find a whole lot of resources. So, and that's continuing to grow as well. So go check that out. Speaking of sponsorships, I have a plea. Actually, I have a favor. And I've talked about this in other episodes, but I have introduced a Patreon campaign to support the show. Now, if you like what I'm doing, and you like the guests, and you like getting this stuff, it's always going to be free to you. I'm never going to charge you for just content outright. I mean, you're always going to get this. But if you like it, I would really appreciate your support and your help financially. It helps me to be able to focus on just producing episodes, and it allows me to dedicate more time to the process. I mean, this takes, I'm not going to lie, it takes a few hours a week to do this, to produce this show. So it's a labor of love. I will do it for free forever if that's what it takes. So if I never get a dime, it's okay. But I would appreciate a little bit of help. So if you will, go check out my Patreon campaign. And the easiest way to get there right now, I think, because I'm foolish and did not write down the URL. But if you go to kevintomlinson.com and click on Fund Me in the navigation up top, it'll take you to the Patreon campaign, and it takes $1. I mean, it really is very little. $1 a month, it would help a great deal. Now, you can give as much as you want, and I'm not going to turn it down any dollar amount, but if you'd commit to at least $1 a month, I mean, basically, you get 4 episodes a month from the Wordslinger here. You get 4 guests per month. For the cost of a cup of coffee at Starbucks, you can get some entertainment out of this show. So, actually, you'd probably pay less than that. You can get 4 episodes for $1. That's pretty cheap. That's a cheap cup of coffee, actually. So, all that said, let's get on to the really important stuff. Today, I've got an interview with a guy. I really love this guy, John. If you're listening, I love you because you crack me up. I'm a regular reader of the Dork Tower comic strip online, and I really enjoy it. But John Kovalic is the artist and writer of that strip, the creator of that. But his work goes much deeper. I mean, he's a cartoonist. If you check out his site, go to dorktower.com. That's the easiest resource. But if you check out his site, you can see right away that he's been doing this for a long time. He's He's got a wide reach, but he's into not just the comic strips, but he does like game design. If you're familiar with the game Apples to Apples, he did the artwork for that. He of course, there's Dork Tower. There's if you go to drivethroughcomics.com, you can see some of his work, and he's just prolific in what he does, and he talks about how he wants to get more so over the course of the year. He's looking at refining what he's doing and improving. That sounds familiar, doesn't it? But some of his games include Kobolds Ate My Baby, which contributed to the title of this episode. Apples to Apples, Munchkin. So go check him out online. But before you do that, take a listen to this interview where we get to talk about all the cool stuff that goes on in John's life, including his workflow, his how he does what he does and what he prefers, and how where his biggest audience is. So go take a listen, and I'll see you on the other side. Hi everybody. So this is what I'm going to consider a special event on the Wordslinger podcast, because I've got somebody that I've followed for a while, cartoonist John Kovalic, who is best known for his work on Dork Tower, which is hilarious, and he's also known for some of his work in games such as Apples to Apples and Munchkin, and Kobolds Ate My Baby, which I have not looked at yet. How's everything going, John? How you doing?
It's busy but good. Thank you very much. How are you?
I'm outstanding, and busy but good is always what we want, right?
It's a lot better than the opposite problem.
So this podcast primarily focuses on story, so I want to get to a little bit of your story and background about how you got into what you do. But I'm really, Dork Tower is how I was introduced to you originally, and I reached out to you years ago, actually, just to say hello. So I was glad you connected. Thanks.
My pleasure.
But so tell me a little bit about the inspiration behind Dork Tower.
Oh, Dork Tower was a series of really cool coincidences.
The best kind.
The best kind. Actually, it was a big turning point for me in my career, because I'd been doing a comic strip called Wildlife, which had been running in local papers here in Madison, and then it was nationally syndicated for a short time, up from like 1988 to about 1993 or so, something like that, maybe a little bit later, 95 maybe. But anyway, for the longest time, I was convinced that was the only thing I could do cartoon-wise, and if Wildlife didn't make it as a comic strip, I would never be a cartoonist. And out of the blue, I was doing a couple of, just because I'm a gamer, and I have been a gamer since my school days back in the 1970s. I was working at this newspaper in Madison, Wisconsin, the Wisconsin State Journal, the morning newspaper here. I'd graduated college. I had a degree in economics, which I essentially got because it let me skip 2 out of 3 classes and get A's.
Yeah.
It just came very naturally to me, and this meant I could hang out at the student newspaper offices, the offices of the Daily Cardinal here on campus in Madison, the University of Wisconsin-Madison campus. And I had talked the State Journal into letting me cover Gen Con, which was then in Milwaukee, and as a feature writer. And so for a couple of years, I went down to Gen Con, and it essentially got me caught back up into the whole gaming industry. And I started talking with people, and I made some friends, and I was talking with editors. And there's a magazine called, at the time, Shadis magazine, which was enormously influential on a number of levels, no longer around, but just a terrific magazine back in the day. And I was doing some just panel cartoons for them, just for the heck of it. And one Gen Con, I was down there talking with the editor, and they used to run the great gaming comic strip, Knights of the Dinner Table.
Yeah.
And Knights of the Dinner Table was leaving to form its own comic book slash magazine. And DJ asked me if I thought I could come up with a new comic strip for them. And between talking with him at the Shadis booth and walking to the exit of Gen Con, I essentially came up with the idea for Dork Tower, just like that, and the name hit me right away. And it was a very very quick process. The main characters were all kind of in place immediately, and I had a really good idea of what the strip was going to be about.
And so just in case listeners don't know the strip, tell us a little about what it is about.
It began as almost purely a role playing strip. Back in the day, back in the mid 90s, there were very few of these such strips. I think Knights of the Dinner Table was one of the first, and Dork Tower was one of the next. But mostly, as far as gaming comics go, you didn't have the explosion that you've seen this last decade on the web. So most of the gaming comics were about the fantasy worlds. The ones that ran in Dragon magazine, for example, were adventures in the fantasy worlds, the various fantasy worlds of Dungeons and Dragons, strips like Wormy and Snarf Quest. And Phil Folio was doing something quite different with What's New with Phil and Dixie, which is one of the most influential to me personally game of comics. I just loved it from the start, and getting to know Phil and Kaya was just one of the highlights of my career. But kind of like Knights of the Dinner Table, I wanted this to be about my gaming group. So I based the characters on various people in my gaming group and how they reacted to things. And while it was in Shadis and then later in Dragon magazine, it was pretty much solidly rooted in the role playing gaming experience. Since then, on the web, it's grown to be a much more general geek culture kind of comic strip, which really sort of reflects where I'm at as far as my own personal experiences go. I've got very little time for gaming anymore. I had to say, working in the gaming industry,
too busy keeping gamers entertained these days.
Yes, exactly. But it allows me to do comics on if I want to do if I want to make a comment on a superhero movie, I can do that. If I want to make a comment on cosplayers at conventions, I can do that. If I want to make a comment on just the general world at large, I can do that with the format. And so I try to go back and get them back to their gaming roots from time to time. But for the most part, it was essentially kind of the Big Bang Theory before the Big Bang Theory was around.
Yeah, I've made that observation before. So geek culture, you brought that up, and that's something, of course, it's interesting because it's sort of like geek culture is big money these days, but only if you're not trying for it.
Yes.
So how do you interact with those readers in that culture? Like, how do you fold in? You started with gaming, but how do you've got a broad palette to work from here, so how do you hone in on what needs to go in the strip?
I don't. I frankly, I am easily distracted. I'm like a puppy dog, oh, look, a squirrel. And so it's whatever captures my attention at the moment goes into the strip. I forget what writer it was who said that you have to write for somebody.
Yeah.
And frankly, that person is me.
Yeah.
This is all like my immediate reaction to things happening around me. And again, it's whatever really captures my imagination that morning will go into the web strip. Sometimes it'll be an incredibly stupid gag cartoon. Sometimes, like right now, it's been a little bit of a slow period for this online strip, simply because I've been so busy with so many other things.
Yeah.
But at the moment, in yesterday's strip, actually, um, there's the reintroduction of a major character from the comic books is back in town. So this is going to be a little more of a character building arc,
Yeah.
which these tend not to get as great a reaction as some of the pop cultural gags,
Right.
but this is what I enjoy about it.
Yeah, these speak more directly to your existing audience, the people who followed you for a while.
Yes,
They're in jokes basically.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Well, one of the problems was for a long time the comic strip and the comic book almost had two separate goals.
Yeah.
And I stopped doing the comic book about 5 years ago simply because life became too busy.
Mm-hmm.
My wife, we discovered my wife was pregnant. It was a very high risk pregnancy. We had just sold Apples to Apples to Mattel. My father in law had just died suddenly of a heart attack. And um, before that, we had an adoption in Russia, which fell through. So these four really big major life changes happened at 3 month intervals.
Yeah.
And I decided I needed to spend more time with family and just sort of, um, lick some root wounds and
Yeah.
celebrate some other life events. And the one part of my job I never really enjoyed that much was the publishing aspect.
Yeah.
With the Dork Tower comic book and Dr. Blanket Snapdragons and a few other things, I did well for myself as a publisher, but I didn't enjoy it.
Yeah.
I really wanted more to be on the creative side of things. And with everything else I was doing, I had other publishers. Obviously, with Munchkin being the prime example, and a lot of the other writing I was doing. So I essentially hung up the self-publishing for a while,
Yeah.
and now I'm at this point where I'm kind of itching to get the comic book going again, simply because I miss the long form, character-driven stories that the comic book series let me do.
Yeah. So do you consider yourself indie despite having publishers?
No, I'm too indie for the mainstream and too mainstream for the indie crowd. It's
Yeah.
it's tough. I fall this really awkward place in the middle.
Yeah. Yeah.
The indie folks probably consider me, so mainstream. And again, with the mainstream, it's like, yeah, it's a very, very uncomfortable position to be in. But I guess I've learned to live with it after this amount of time.
Yeah. Yeah. But when it comes to your digital platform, I mean, is that all you, or does someone back that?
It's all me at the moment.
Yeah.
And that's one of the big changes which I'm trying to instigate for next year. And I'm going to be blogging about this a little bit
Yeah.
because overall, this was a really good year for Dork Tower Online. But for the last couple of years, I will go into each year really feeling good about things. And then sometime around November, stuff starts to slow down and I get a little bit tired. And one of the problems is I've sort of relegated Dork Tower Online to almost a hobby status.
Yeah.
And that's got to change. It's got to become more of a real operating business, simply because until it does, anytime a big project comes along as a freelancer, you just want to grab those projects because you never know when those projects are going to stop.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And Dork Tower inevitably is the one thing which gets pushed to the back.
Yeah.
And I've this has happened the last couple of years now, the last 3 years probably. And so I want to take a really good look at the operations, and I'm talking with some people now who are going to be helping with that. And I want to get the strips up there on a timely basis, on a regular basis,
Mm-hmm.
but also make it so that it's sustainable, so that it's not simply a hobby for me, and I'm not just doing it because it strikes my fancy on a certain day, but I am doing it as a real ongoing business, which kind of almost sounds dirty when you're
Oh, I
a
know.
writer, but the reality is your work has got to pay your bills.
Exactly. Yeah. And I co-host another podcast called the Self-Publishing Answers podcast, and one of the things
Right.
we've been
Yes.
talking about recently has been, getting yourself on track and planning for the upcoming year, and things like accountability and that sort of thing. So when it comes to your work, at least on the more independent side, because I assume you have deadlines imposed on you by your publishers.
Yes.
Yeah. So as far as your more independent work, I mean, how do you approach getting that all in line? Like, how do you who are you accountable to? I guess.
I'm accountable to myself
Yeah.
for my own work, and that's been one of the problems because, well, one of the things I've done, which I'm really excited about this year, especially like in the last few months, I came back from a convention in Italy, which was, the Lucca convention, which has become I believe, the second largest comic book and gaming convention in the world,
Yeah.
after, is it Tokyo is number one? And I was exhausted. It was busy. It was bustling. Everybody, the lines were fantastic. I mean, it was amazing. It was the first convention I've ever been at when we had to limit people to one, sketch per person
Yeah.
because there were just too many people. So these are all wonderful problems to have. Again, going back to this, at the same point in time, it is totally exhausting. And I came back wiped out.
Yeah.
And I had all of these big projects on the horizon because in the gaming industry, December and January are huge months because things have got to go to press before Chinese New Year
Yeah.
if you want to have them back in time for the big summer convention season, especially Gen Con. So I've got these, another 6 to 8 really busy weeks in front of me right now, and I had no idea how I was going to get things done. And out of this sense of almost comic desperation, I actually came up with a solution that works. And it's been the first big change I have instigated into my workday in probably 3 years. And that is quite simply I come to the studio every morning and I leave my computer and I leave my cell phone at home. And it works like a charm. It's just me and the drawing table and my old iPod, which has got no games on it. It's one of these, the wheel
Oh
iPods.
wow. Yeah. Okay.
So there's like no distraction there. I can just, play my music, and I get so much done in the mornings. So I'm at this point in time, I'm ahead on all of my other deadlines, and it shouldn't be that difficult to start slotting in, my own projects again.
So you bring up something interesting, and I know I'm very curious about how other people work. I have my own workflow. I've got a writing space, and then I occasionally wander out amongst the three-dimensional people and write with them sometimes. But so, tell me a little about your workflow. Like, what's the setup for your business? How does a typical day go with John Kovalic?
Well, these now, prior to this, I would either work from home on some days and then come to the studio on other days. I've got a studio which is about a 20-minute drive away from my house. It's out in the
Mm-hmm.
country. It's actually our old house, and we never sold it when we bought the new house because the market was absolutely flat. And we decided just to hold on to it until the market bounced back. I was renting a studio in downtown Madison,
Mm-hmm.
which was great for a couple of years. And then I started having some problems with a couple of my studio mates, and also just being downtown in a city like Madison became extremely distracting. So that went from a really productive work environment to an extremely unproductive work environment. I
Yeah.
moved. I moved to the studios, to the old house, and again, it's out in the country. There's no distraction. It's a beautiful little setting. You occasionally get deer or wild turkey wandering through the backyard.
Oh, nice.
And
Built-in
also,
lunch.
yes,
Uh,
and also, when I've got, time, I've got my bike, one of my bikes here, so I can go for a bike ride in the summer
yeah.
or the autumn. I can do little projects around getting the house back into shape. I can, but anyway, this was working really well. And then the internet became a huge problem for me. And on the one hand, it's so absolutely necessary these days
Yeah.
for promotion, for self-promotion. Again, that sounds like such an ugly word, but essentially that's what my Twitter feed is for. And my Facebook page, and occasionally these other platforms, which I'm horrible at.
Yeah.
I'm just really bad at Tumblr. And,
Yeah. Yeah. Me too.
um, so I need to. But so anyway, that went from being a very useful testing ground for jokes and uh, platform to let people know there was stuff going on, a PR platform, to being a huge distraction. And I would literally look something up online for a drawing, for a Munchkin drawing, for example. It's like, okay, I need to look this up. And I would find myself at the computer for an hour having absolutely forgotten what I was originally going to look up.
Yeah.
I would start tweeting, and again, you can just almost see the hours melt by. And my days were again becoming just hugely unproductive. I would get a few drawings done, and at the end of the day, maybe try and rush out of Dork Tower if I could.
Yeah.
So I'm so excited about this new change because it was like recognizing the problem is such an important. I mean, recognizing how you as an artist, as a creator, and that sounds really pretentious, coming from a cartoonist.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But recognizing how you work best is so important if you're a freelancer. You've got to really be critical of your work methods, especially if they're just not working for you,
Right.
and find something that does work. And this is a lesson which I knew from years ago, which I'd forgotten. And so, coming back from Italy, I just left the cell phone and left the computer at home. I had no means of getting online. And I started cranking out work, and I was so happy with the work. And I would get to the end of the day, and I would have doubled, in some cases, tripled my productivity. And all of a sudden, all of these projects of mine, which had been on the back burner, which had been, these nice pipe dreams, suddenly the potential was there to really attack them and get them finished and get them out there. So it's been it's been a very busy month for me because we just had family vacation. We've had family visiting for the holidays. It is the holidays. But nevertheless, I'm getting so much more work done these days, and I'm so absolutely ecstatic about it. I will just come into the studio. I'll drop my daughter off at kindergarten.
Yeah.
And so that helps, having to get up and get out the door
Yeah. Yeah.
at 7:30. And by the way, my college self is absolutely disgusted that for me right now, sleeping in means 8 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah. No, I'm with you.
Oh, it's like, who am I? What have I done with John? Do you ever remember in college, like sleeping in until 10? It's
Oh,
like,
yeah.
what the heck? I
Oh,
could
yeah.
not imagine doing that these
Yeah,
days.
and sleeping through classes. That's what gets
Oh,
me
yes.
now. Like,
Oh my goodness! It was funny because I used to schedule these 8:15 a.m. classes, and I think I may have gone to two of them before
yeah,
dropping them.
exactly. Yeah.
The 10 o'clock was the earliest class I'd ever take. Anyway, so now I will get up, around 6 o'clock. This morning, I used the time my daughter was getting ready to finish off a comic strip, drive her to kindergarten, drop her off, drive to the studio. Usually get to the studio about 8:30 in the morning, and just having nothing there but work is fantastic. I'll get by 10 o'clock. I'll have 3, 4, 5, maybe 6 Munchkin cards drawn. If it's a great day, I try not to draw more than 3 hours a day, simply because you don't want to. Well, I got tennis elbow from drawing Munchkin a couple of years ago with some huge deadlines.
Wow.
And I like to think somewhere out there, if karma is to be believed, there's a tennis player who got Munchkin elbow. It's just sitting there going, what the fuck?
Yeah. Where'd this come from?
Yes.
Otherwise known as Kovalic disease.
Yes, exactly. No, Kovalic disease is sending a tweet or an email, and the moment you hit send and you see the thing disappear,
Yeah.
you spot the typo.
Yeah.
That is my superpower: is catching typos the moment it's too late to do anything about them.
Oh man,
Uh,
that and the nickel.
and so yeah, I will draw for 3, maybe 4 hours a day, and then I will pack everything up and go to a coffee shop or go home and start going through the busy part of the business, the emails, answering emails, uh, the writing, whatever writing needs to be done,
Hmm.
just getting things in shape, trying to come up with ideas for the next day. The worst thing in the world is getting into the studio one morning and not having any idea what you're going to do.
Right.
Um, it's that jumping on a drawing at 8:30 and getting the first drawing finished by 9 or 10:30 or 9:30
How do you keep
is the
that?
important part.
How do you keep those ideas going? Like, you know, well, you come in the next day and start working on something that presumably you've already got it all mapped out and planned out. Like, how do you keep that flowing?
It's just sketching.
Yeah.
I remembered when I was a kid watching a documentary on Schultz, and Schultz would start a day just simply, doodling and letting his mind wander. And to an extent, that works for me. But also, I'm one of these people to whom ideas will just pop out of nowhere, it
Hmm.
seems. And so when those happen, I've got to have a sketchbook with me at all times to get the idea down quickly. Otherwise, I will get 3 or 4 of these hitting and I will forget 2 of them.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I hate that. I hate that feeling so much.
So do you keep like a moleskine or something in your pocket, or
Yes, I
yeah,
do. And I used to print out like I was. This is the weird thing. I've been using those for years,
yeah.
and up until about 6 months ago, I thought it was moleskin.
Oh,
I just where did that E come from at the end? I
I
did not
know.
notice that.
No, it appeared all of a sudden for me too one day, and I have hundreds and hundreds of these things crammed into actually an old gun ammo box, so to keep them safe, I guess. But yeah,
Yes.
I pronounced it wrong for years too, so don't feel too bad.
Yeah, I guess I assumed that at some point back in 100 years ago, they were literally made out of moleskins, and
They
they
must have
just
been, yeah.
it would take so many moles to make one book. It would be tragic.
I'm so glad to meet a fellow Moleskine enthusiast, though, because I thought I was practically the only one left because everyone else uses their iPhone and Evernote, and which I do too. But uh,
Oh, I can't. I need the feel of paper in my
yeah,
hands. There's just absolutely no comparison. That's the same reason I still draw on paper. It's taken me a lifetime to find the right paper and the right pens. I'm
yeah,
not going to give those up now.
yeah,
I'll
yeah.
do the coloring on computer. And again, this is like when I get home, I will scan the artwork in. And yesterday, for example, it was the afternoon. We're scanning in Munchkin drawings and sending them off to Steve Jackson Games.
Hmm.
Coloring Dork Tower. That happens in the afternoon. When I'm fine. It's busy work. I can be distracted at that point. I'll
Yeah,
still get that basic work done.
yeah, yeah. So you mentioned earlier that
I
you were.
rambled, by the way. I should
No,
have
no,
warned
no. Hey,
this.
this is the show for rambling. Believe me, I'm thinking of making a subtitle. The You mentioned earlier that you would sometimes look something up online, and then that would become a huge distraction. So, how do you compensate? Like, if you need to reference something, how do you compensate for no internet access in your work?
The main thing I do is the night before or the afternoon before, I look at what drawings I'm intending to be doing the next day, and I will print out the reference material.
Okay.
I'll just go online and essentially do that, like quite literally. I can't tell you what this project is for, but at this point in time, I've got a sheet of paper in my hands, which has got a fixed speed bicycle, a pair of moccasins, and a cardigan sweater vest.
Okay.
And
Throw in
so,
some duct tape, and you've got like a Ocean's 11 kind of thing going on.
so yeah, that's the main thing is I've got to know what I need to do the next day.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, again, just the time I save is absolutely worth it.
Yeah.
Being internet, and the other thing is being internet free is great. I will get into the studio and I was starting to feel mentally, creatively, almost claustrophobic
Yeah.
with the internet around all the time. I mean, I knew it was a drain, I knew it was a problem for me, and I wasn't sure how to stop this. And I thought it was just a question of self-discipline,
Yeah.
which with me it wasn't, because I have none. Uh, uh, but now, without the computer there, without the iPhone there, I get to the studio and I feel great.
Yeah.
It is my mind. It's just a wonderful feeling. Just the potential, the creative potential, is that feeling of this is just time to make something, to put something on paper. That's an amazing feeling.
I can't even imagine it. I'm trying to imagine even one day without my iPhone, and I'm already wanting to jab myself in the face with something. So,
Well,
um,
it was kind of, I mean, the my way of thinking was, we survived without
yes,
smartphones,
yeah,
20 years ago.
yeah,
And I've got a phone here. I've got a phone line to the studio, so I can call my wife. My wife can call me. My editors, my publishers can get in
right,
touch with me. Um, and it's actually been a little difficult for some of them to realize that I'm going to be completely out of touch
yeah,
electronically until about 1 o'clock, maybe 2 o'clock every afternoon.
yeah, yeah,
Uh, so because they're just not used to this, and, most people act like adults and can moderate their internet time.
right, yeah, yeah,
um, but it works, and I think the increased productivity makes them happier than just me being accessible those
right.
extra 4 hours in the day would.
So, what led to the game work? Like, you're designing. You're not only you're illustrating other people's games, right? But you're also designing some of your own games.
Yes. Again, it's the whole ADD with me.
Yeah.
I grew up in England. I was born in Manchester. We moved over to the States when I was 2, and I moved back to England when I was 10. I lived in England from 10 until about 2021 before moving back to the States for college and settling here. But in England, in Britain, I guess, is probably better. In Britain, there's this assumption that people can do more than one thing. If you're a great actor, you're also expected to be a really good director, and you're
Yeah.
supposed to be able to write. If you're a scientist, you're supposed to be able to write. I mean, it's you're supposed to be, Jonathan Miller. Uh, my first introduction to Jonathan Miller was this amazing documentary he produced back in the late 70s called The Body in Question.
Hmm.
Jonathan Miller is a doctor. He's directed. He was part of a comedy troupe. People just seem there seems to be an expectation that you can do more than one thing. Whereas in the States, I think people just prefer, for the most part, lumping you into one category, and you're supposed to do one thing, and you're not supposed to do anything else. I don't know why that is. I don't know why there is this in general. I mean, there are going to be some exceptions in both cases,
Yeah.
but I've again going back to that hilarious point where I only thought that I thought that the only comic I could ever do would be this comic strip Wildlife, which
Hmm.
was, I think it's fair to say it was a bit of a failure. It never got into that many papers. I wasn't ready for it. I was too young for it. The syndicate I was with had never really dealt with a comic strip before, so it was just a bad mix all around.
Yeah.
Um, and going from that point to the point where I've got, Dork Tower and Doctor Blink, and I'm working on 2 kids' books at the moment, which I'm really excited about. And I've got Munchkin. I'm illustrating Munchkin. I've illustrated over 5,000 Munchkin cards. I was a gaming publisher. I'm still a co-owner of Out of the Box Games. I don't really work that much for them anymore, simply because I don't have that much time. But we published Apples to Apples, and I worked on the development of Apples to Apples. And I've always been a gamer, so I've always had these ideas for games, but working directly with games out of the box really honed my sense of what a party game should be, how a party game could work. Um, and it all gets thrown into this big old mix.
Yeah.
And I do have this tremendous career. I mean, I'm a tremendously fortunate career. I'm so lucky. I am so absolutely lucky that I get to do whatever interests me
Yeah.
at this point in my life. And at the moment, I've got this game which I was working on with some friends of mine called Double Feature,
Hmm.
which is coming out in March, I believe, from Renegade Studios. And I'm so excited about this game. I absolutely think this is the best movie game I've ever played. And I'm not saying, this is because I've worked on this game. That's not the point. I mean,
Yeah.
these guys, my friends, came up with the main idea for the game. I threw in some ideas for it, but it's their basic concepts which have made this so fantastic. And hey, I get to work on this because I can. So anyway, it all started uh, by a very odd series of coincidences.
Again.
I mean, extremely. This is if you thought the Shadis thing was more pure luck. I guess
Hmm.
those coincidences were not so odd. But I'd been doing some of these panel strips for Shadis
Hmm.
back in the early to mid '90s, and I'm trying to get the timeline correct here. I had started. No, I don't believe Dork Tower had started yet. Um, but I was doing editorial cartoons for the Wisconsin State Journal along with
Okay.
feature writing, and this was back when during the O.J. Simpson trial.
Hmm.
And one of O.J. Simpson's, look it up, all you kids. Go to Wikipedia. Uh,
I was just I'm just
uh,
listening to all the people like suddenly typing in O.J. Simpson to find out who that guy is.
and one of O.J. Simpson's lawyers uh, was he was the guy in the Naked Gun movies, right,
Yeah.
kids?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
one of O.J. Simpson's lawyers had said that there's a conspiracy out to get O.J. Simpson,
Hmm.
and I did an editorial cartoon about this, which sort of brought in all of these various different conspiracy theories. It was a very typical circular editorial cartoon in as much as it had a series of arrows connecting things and they all went around in a circle building up to this conspiracy. There was a lone gunman, there was a grassy knoll, there was a faked moon landing, so things of this nature. And part of the conspiracy was I had the Bavarian Illuminati.
Okay.
And as a Steve Jackson Games fanboy and as a gamer, I drew the Bavarian Illuminati as the Steve Jackson Games pyramid. And I think it was dancing with the top hat for reasons I still am not entirely sure. I just, kind of thought that would be goofy fun at the time.
Yeah.
And 2 weeks later, I got a phone call from Steve Jackson Games. And this was one of Steve's, one of the people, one of the women working there, Dana Blankenship, said that somebody had faxed my cartoon to Steve. And Steve had two comments, one of which was there was a typo in it, which is very, 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 very Steve.
Typical.
But the second of which was he wanted to know if I wanted to take over the Murphy's Rules feature in Pyramid Magazine.
Oh.
Murphy's Rules is this wonderful feature which is still running, and my great friend and fantastic cartoonist Greg Hyland now draws it in Pyramid Magazine Online. But basically, Murphy's Rules was a feature I was familiar with. It took a rule from a game, which was ridiculous for one reason or another,
Yeah.
because it just made no sense, or there was a typo in it which made it hilarious, or whatever the reason. And I would illustrate it. I would illustrate this insane situation which came about because of this rule.
Okay.
And I was familiar with this feature because an editorial cartooning hero of mine, Ben Sargent from Austin, Texas, had illustrated this for a while. So I was just all kinds of super delighted that I was actually going to be doing some work for Steve Jackson Games.
Very cool.
And this went on for a few months, and it went on very well. And then I got wind. This was during the days that Magic the Gathering was,
Yeah.
and I was really into Magic back then, and my whole gaming group was. And I would buy myself a deck of Magic cards. I would buy my wife a deck of Magic cards, so that she wouldn't hate gamers. She was not a gamer, and I
Right.
wanted to get her into gaming somehow. And I'm not making this up. She got all the good cards. You know,
Of
I would
course, yeah.
my boosters in my decks going Plague Rat, Swamp, Swamp, Skeletons. She would be like, "What's a Black Lotus? Is that good?" Um, and true story, she actually bought her wedding dress by selling her Black Lotus
Oh, wow.
later. Um,
Wow.
in the meantime, if anybody wants to buy some swamps, I've got a lot. I can tell you. They are, bay and a black border. Um, anyway, so I gotten when the Steve Jackson Games was producing their own collectible card game, and this is very unlike me. I just called Steve up, or maybe I sent him an email. I probably sent him an email, essentially with the query being, "Hey, I hear you're doing this collectible card game. Do you need any help?" And luckily for me, if not for Steve Jackson Games, they were behind schedule with this. So Steve sent me a couple of Illuminati New World Order cards to test me out.
Yeah.
And um, he basically said, "Okay, we want this kind of Watchman style. Can you do it Watchman style?"
Interesting.
Watchman. And I was like, "Sure, I can." And in the meantime, I'm going, "No, I can't. What the hell?" But the first two cards weren't that difficult. I believe it was the Japan card and the France card
Okay.
were my two tests, and these were both could be done still a little cartoony still. And he liked them, and so he sent me 20 more cards. And this was a great introduction to the gaming business for me, and B, to working with Steve,
Mm-hmm.
because I was really pulling this out of nowhere. I could not draw Watchmen style. I was going over these drawings time and time again, trying to get them right. I was trying to come up with a way to draw this, and some of these cards Steve would send back 6 times for revisions.
Yeah.
And that was a really good introduction to not not getting too full of yourself.
Right.
When a revision comes back, not being, "Oh, but it was perfect, but this was my special snowflake." Instead, just going, "Okay, I will give you what you want," and just sit down and try and do it again the next time. And yeah, the one card which got sent back 6 times was this really simple card. All it was a boot, a marching boot, and I forget what the card name was, but Steve had a very specific kind of boot in mind. And this was the days before
You could send you something from Google.
you could go online and he
Yeah.
could send a link to a URL.
Yeah.
This was actually about 20 years ago, almost exactly, because the Daily Illuminator had just begun. And I'd been reading in Wired magazine about these graphic web interfaces you could get, and what the heck's the World Wide Web, and what's this all about? So yes, this went on for a while, but I got 20 cards into the set, and that was it. That actually led to me joining Out of the Box Games a year or two later, because one of the founders of Out of the Box was a gamer and played Illuminati and saw that I'd illustrated these. And so when they needed an illustrator, they came to me, and that actually turned into me becoming an investor in the company, which I really didn't want to do. I kind of felt a little bit pressured into that. But that was life changing
Yeah, it's worked out for you.
because it worked out because the second game we published was this little thing called Apples to Apples,
Yeah.
which went on to sell 4 million copies,
Mm-hmm.
and which was then bought by Mattel. Uh, and a little bit after that, Steve Jackson got back to me and asked me if I wanted to illustrate an entire game for them called Shea Geek,
Yes.
and I was thrilled. This was back when Dork Tower was still probably my main source of income. From just the I had quit the State Journal. My wife had said, "Honey, you're miserable. Just quit, and I'll support you."
Yeah.
Which is the greatest thing anybody who enters the creative
Yes.
life can have, is a spouse who is supportive. It is just the best. I
Yeah.
cannot even begin to tell you. This was 5 weeks before our wedding. She said, "Honey, just quit." um, and anyway, after Shea Geek, a little while later, Steve got back in touch with me and he asked me if I was interested in illustrating this game that he had designed called Munchkin.
Yeah.
And for me, this was unbelievable. I mean, the fact that I would be illustrating a game that the Steve Jackson had created was beyond amazing. I mean, this was the total. I didn't know the word squee back then, but squee would absolutely have been insufficient.
Yeah.
So that was it. In the space of probably 3 years, I was hit with 2 once-in-a-lifetime games.
Yeah.
And that changed everything.
Yeah, that is pretty amazing overall. I mean, you have these. You seem to have a knack for attracting these sort of out of the blue opportunities, that's a good one to cultivate.
It's fun, but you have to remember that I've also illustrated lots and lots and lots
Yes.
of games that have just not done quite so
Well,
well.
and that's what people forget too. Is that success, overnight success, quote unquote, rarely ever happens. It's usually that like 10-year leap.
Oh,
Of putting
man.
things out as often as possible, as quickly as possible.
And honestly, the one thing which I learned at the newspaper was to work quickly.
Yeah.
And that really helps in Munchkin because some of these Munchkin deadlines can be insane.
Oh yeah.
It's no matter Munchkin is still growing by leaps and bounds, and there are all these opportunities that happen, which I've got to I'll get the call from Steve Jackson Games, and something will have to be done in a matter of weeks. Sometimes like 150 cards
Yeah.
will have to be done within a month, and they do realize that it's not great when this happens.
Yeah.
But also there are these times when this is an opportunity that cannot be missed, so we have to act on it immediately.
Yeah.
And I do credit the State Journal for teaching me that there are these times when, as much as you would love to spend that extra hour or two per drawing, you don't always get that, so you just have to do the best you can in the time allotted.
Oh yeah. Real artists ship.
Yes, exactly.
So
It drives me nuts. A lot of young
yeah.
creators will quote that Douglas Adams line. I love deadlines. I love the whooshing sound they make as they
Right.
pass by. And my main reaction to that is, kid, you are not Douglas Adams.
Yeah. If you were Douglas Adams, you could do that.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. So where is your what's your biggest audience right now? Is it for Dork Tower or is it for the games?
No, it's probably Munchkin,
Yeah.
hugely so. I mean, Dork Tower has been on the back burner probably for a good 5 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I feel that the main Dork Tower audience has been ill-served, and it's something I almost feel the need to apologize for. Um, but what I do, actually, I do feel the need to apologize for that because I have put it on the back burner for a while, and that's got to change. And so we've got a couple of big things coming up in 2015, which I hope will go part way to making amends, and also part way to me getting Dork Tower back to being a viable job and not simply a hobby anymore.
Yeah.
And one of the things we're doing right now to get people ready for that, by the way, is Dork Covenant, For the next month, actually through January, Dork Covenant is a free download.
Oh, excellent. All right.
So if you want to read Dork Tower, that is the first of the collections, and it's to lead up to some of these big announcements we're going to be having in 2015. I'm just throwing that out there.
Where can people find that?
Dorktower.com.
All right.
You can get to there, or if you just go to drivethroughcomics.com and do a search for Dork Covenant, it's actually because of Drive Through Comics help that this is made possible.
Excellent. All right. Well, you heard it here. All right. I don't want to soak up any more of your time, John. Thanks so much for being on the show. It's been outstanding. I love your work. I know a lot of people that I run with are big fans, so we're going to keep looking out for you. My wife, actually, she didn't realize it, but she loves your work too. She thinks all the Munchkin stuff is cute whenever we see it in Barnes and Noble. So, so she didn't
I,
realize that was you until I told her this morning.
it's funny because between Munchkin and all the Cthulhu stuff,
Yeah.
and now Cash and Guns,
Yeah.
which is this game I just illustrated for Asmodee and Repos, which is actually that's a fantastic game. By the way, do check out Cash and Guns.
Passion gun.
It's essentially the concept of the game is it's a very silly party game.
Yeah.
Plays very quickly. The rules are very easy. It's the last scene of Reservoir Dogs.
Okay.
It's the gang holed up in the basement, and you're trying to divide the cash from the heist,
Okay.
and you're pulling guns on the rest of your crew. Um, and so anyway, one of the things I've realized is that one of my job descriptions is having to make horrible things cute,
Yeah.
and I just want that on my next business card.
Exactly. Makes horrible things cute. I'm behind you, man.
Yep.
All right. So, well, if you want to learn more about John and his work, you can check him out online at dorktower.com. And they can also follow you on Twitter and Facebook and other places, right?
Yes, and now that I'm not on Twitter so often, I
Yeah.
won't be blasting.
So don't
on-
bother following him on Twitter. He's not paying attention anymore.
No, now it's just the afternoon tweets.
Okay. So
but
tweet him late at night.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's it.
And what's your Twitter handle?
Muskrat_John, and I wish it wasn't. But so why didn't I just do Dork Tower? That would've been
Yeah, well, you weren't thinking ahead, I guess. And I always wanted to ask you about the muskrat, John, but
I honestly don't know why. I mean, obviously reasons, Carson the Muskrat, but it's
Yeah.
like, why did I choose that then and not just go with Dork Tower?
it
or
sticks around, though.
Kovalic or whatever, whatevs, as the
What
kids say.
else? Well, you can check him out as at muskrat_John on Twitter. You can check him out online at dorktower.com. And, of course, you can always find out more about him on my site, where I'll have links in the show notes to everything. You can go to kevintumlinson.com/podcast, where you can also subscribe. So subscribe and give me some stars and some love so that I can keep doing this stuff. So, John, thanks so much for being on the show. Hang out for a second. I'm gonna cut us off, and we'll just have a couple of parting words. But for everyone else,
Excellent.
tune in next week and see who we got. Take care, everybody. Well, that was John Kovalic of Dork Tower and Munchkins and Kobolds Ate My Baby and about a million other things. So, fantastic interview. I love talking to guys like John. I'm a creative, so I love talking to other creatives, and it was interesting to hear his take on, how he escapes internet for the day. Given that 99% of what I do is actually on the internet, it doesn't sound appealing to me, but I can see the value of, of pulling back a little, cutting off transmission, as it were, and getting away from your phone and getting away from your internet to actually produce. There's a lot of value in that. I should probably do that more. And I do, actually. I mean, I produce a lot of content, so I got to get away from the internet every now and then, right? Facebook. Oh, my nemesis. Actually, not my nemesis, my love. Go nowhere, Facebook. I love you. So, if you're interested in being a cartoonist, you can always float some questions John's way. I don't know how in-depth he'll be able to get with you, but I promised to pass things along, and so we'll see how that works out. And I'm sure he'll be happy to. And I know a few others out there, so I may bring more cartoonists on the show. It's something I did briefly in my career. It's hard to find things I didn't do, at least briefly, in my career, actually, so prolific. If you, again... Anytime you have a question, why don't you fire it my way? And I don't care what the question is at this point. Just ask me anything, and it may lead to a guest on the show. If you have guest suggestions, that's a good way to start. You can go to kevintumlinson.com/podcast where you can leave me a voicemail directly from your computer. If you are overseas, that's a great option. All it takes is a microphone, and an internet connection. If you are on your phone and you have some sort of overseas ability to dial overseas or whatever, you can always call me up. Call the Word Slinger hotline at 281-809-9673. That's 281-809-WORD. And if you leave me a voicemail, I will get it. I will listen to it. I will chuckle because I'm amused. And then I will, unless it's offensive in some way, I will play it on the air. But you guys aren't all that offensive. You're all good people. You're good folks. So be sure to check that out. Again, I am happy to produce every week. I love talking to these guests. Like I say, I'm going to do this forever, regardless of whether I get paid for it. I'll keep doing it as long as people will let me, as long as the technology holds out. Because frankly, I learn a lot from these. I started this podcast 50% for me and 50% for you. My 50% is all about connecting with these people and learning something that I can apply to my own life and shape my own story, which is what I'm all about. I love the idea of story as a tool for getting the life you want, and I believe in that. I believe that our stories are what shape our lives, and so we can take control of that. We can write our own story. I believe that. And these interviews are all part of that. But it does help quite a bit. I love this podcast. I love doing it. I want to keep doing it. Heck, I'd do this full time. If this was the only thing I was allowed to do with my life, the only thing I was allowed to produce with my life, I'd be pretty happy with this. So if you are interested in supporting that, please go online. Check out my Patreon campaign. You can go to kevintumlinson.com and click Fund Me. And you can find me on Patreon itself. I'll pull up that URL. Let's see, real quick. I think I can do this real quick. Yeah, so that's patreon.com/KevinTumlinson, and that's the exact same link. If you go to kevintumlinson.com and click Fund Me, it takes you to this page where you will see a little intro from me, recorded right here in the studio, and get a little bit of background on what I'm doing. There's a picture of me and my gorgeous wife, Kara, on that page, so you get to look at something pretty. And I was going to make a joke there, but I'm not going to make it because I'll get killed. And you can also kind of catch up. I have these, I don't know, I am missing the boat on how the creations and activity things work, so I'm going to figure that out. But the activity, I've been posting the actual podcasts since I started the campaign. So it's another repository of shows. So I've got the one from currently the one from Joanna Penn is up, and the one from my friend Mark Isaacs is up. So this one will be up as well. And go check that out. Give a little support and help me keep going. It's very useful. It's very handy to have money. And I like money. But anyway, lest you think this show is all about money, I want you to know that I'm coming back every week to give you the very best interviews I can dig up with the most amazing and interesting people I can find. Next week, I'm actually going to be speaking with, his name is Joseph, and I always mess up his last name. So it's Joseph Jepson, who is with he has a project called Never Leave the Playground. And if you want to get a little bit of an early start, you can go check him out at neverleavetheplayground.com, where you can learn about his he's got this sort of eclectic program that involves learning physical tasks to promote brain growth. So the dude's 74 years old. He can run circles around me, and I'm going to guess probably you. So go check him out. And then The week after that, we got coming up Greg McBride, who is the author of Weightless, My Life as a Fat Man and How I Escaped It. So you can also check him out. Go on Amazon. I'm going to have links eventually so that you can purchase these books through my site. But you can check either one of those out and get a little familiar with them as you go. So hope that you will tune in for those. Those were great interviews, by the way. Stephen, by the way, man, I barely did anything. I said, hey, this is Stephen Jepson. And then for the next hour, he took over. So if you want to learn more about today's guest, John Kovalic, surf on over to dorktower.com for starters. That's where you can see his strip. It's irregular at the moment by his own admission, but I think he's planning to gear up and do a lot more of it. You can see some of his work for games like Apples to Apples, Munchkin, and others. I don't have a complete list. I should have gotten a complete list, but go check him out. You can also connect with him online on Twitter at @muskrat_John. And again, you'll find links to all these in the show notes. So happy to give you that. So hope you're having a great day. Hope you have a great weekend since this is Friday here. And I don't know when you're listening to this. Hey, welcome from the future, and I hope you're having a great day, whatever day it is. If this is being listened to after the apocalypse, by the way, thank you for tuning in, even though the world has ended. If you're a zombie, all right, take care, guys, and I will see you again next week.
Word Slinger.